always was the a little bit rebellious towards the against the standardizations of certain elements of drum and bass. We all come from understanding that music definitely in its own core has to be experimental, and we remember drum and bass to be one of those, as I like to say, elements of surprise where you really don't know what is going to happen. But here's the thing, like even those big corpos are searching for those two guys in the garage who make stuff like not knowing what they have. I call those two guys Schrödinger guys. They're not there, but they're there until not observed.
Yeah.
Building something new, right?
Yeah. I don't know whether you wanted to do like a podcast or if this was going to be a written interview or what you fancy doing, really.
I mean, up to you, man. You know more than I do what is most suiting for the whole thing.
Well, we talk a lot, and I think that lends itself to a podcast. When you and I catch up, we don't stop for a long time.
One more thing.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the One More Thing podcast. My name is Dave Colombo Jenkins, but you probably already knew that. My guest's name you definitely already know. It is Billain, or Billain as some people like to say. He's been a maverick across the bass universe for a very, very long time, having come through on labels such as Lifted and Breed 12 Inches way back in the late 2000s. I've been interviewing him personally since 2012 during his releases on Bad Taste, and I've been interviewing him pretty consistently ever since. Billain is in a world of his own, you might say a universe of his own. He has created his own world, his own characters, his own lore within his albums, within the narrative of the musical world that he's curated, which has since manifested into a community which is called the Cyber Neuro community, which you will find on Discord. Billain is one of those hyper-connective, super creative, incredibly intelligent individuals that drum and bass thrives on, really, and needs right at the very, very forefront. A bit of a black sheep in terms of non-standardization and pushing boundaries and trying new ideas. He's always been really, like I said, in a world of his own and done things in his own way. And this has reached a brand new peak this summer with the release of his third album, Mirror, on Evolution Chamber. It also coincided with a headline set at Let It Roll, the mothership of drum and bass festivals, which I believe is a long time coming and a stage that he should have been on many, many years ago. This is a fantastic interview. Every time we talk for far too long. And in true awkward nature, me style, the conversation doesn't even start particularly professionally. So this is an amazing interview. It's an hour and a half of real deep discussions about the creative process, about where we're at technologically, where we're at psychologically, and how we can break away from a few of the things that are holding us back creatively. This is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the One More Thing podcast. And thank you very much to Billain for joining us. You will enjoy the next hour and a half. Thank you very much.
One more thing.
And like the last time I spoke to you, I think it was around about this time, because there was something on Vision, but then it was also on One More Thing. It was when you'd won 8 awards for Fugitive, and I think that was really just the start of it. Really, that wasn't even. Yeah, I think what was the grand total of awards in the end? I think in the double figures.
30, and I paused like sending the film to some other festivals, but like even to this day we're still having invites, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's not jump in too much there. I mean, let's pretend we're doing something a bit more formal. How are you? Like, how has your summer been?
I'm doing great, man. It's chaotic. It's like all in the best possible way. It's kind of a grind, but not in a bad way. I think this is the century we live in, so there's a sense of a sweet grind and there's a sense of a bad one. So like, there's a balance also between those two. I
Yeah,
think I'm in
yeah.
the middle at this point.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you'd be able to really relate to this because there's the sweet grind and the sour grind in that way. And sometimes you don't know which way it's going to go, and you're planting seeds. You're planting seeds and you're cultivating the land, and you're just throwing yourself into into your vision. And you don't know what the outcome of that is going to be entirely, but
Nobody
you just know
knows, to
that
be
your
honest.
energy is
Yeah.
going in the right direction. And sometimes that can be turn out to be sweeter than you thought, and other times it can end up becoming quite sourer than you thought. Really, and you don't know when you're in the thick of it, do you?
I think it's coming back to instincts, like full circle. There was like a period of our lives where we were like relying on many things around us, and then we just went introspective again, I think, because everything that I was right now kind of focusing on is mostly like having like turning off the noise of the internet and just like trusting some instincts about what I'm gonna do,
Yeah.
whether it's like creating or something. I don't know. Honestly, like I feel maybe that also comes with a self-esteem thing, like which is not easy. Because, as an artist, you're always in the wrong to yourself.
Definitely,
But yeah,
definitely. Or you are your own worst critic in that type of way, and that you could never really do enough to appease that voice, I think, really. But it does seem like you must have achieved enough for you to give yourself a little bit of a break and to be more lenient on yourself and to have, as much self-esteem as you ought to have, really, from your art.
I well I think I started enjoying more that I when I stopped caring. I mean, that's not in a bad way. Um, it's just I think what we don't see a lot in these like mu music has been presented as a certain idea of supplying, people with messaging, like with narratives and stuff. But I think, like I wrote somewhere that it's like fans sometimes should come last, and what you do with your stuff should be at first place, like because it's also about self-discovery. Um, well, I'm not sure about either of those. I just like felt, you know what, like how about we do this when we were like, very, very young, and we were doing things based on just few premises like, oh, this looks cool. Does it sound cool? Does it look
Yeah.
cool? And that thing leveled all my obstacles at the moment, like for many things that I was doing, which is a weird
Right.
one. But it
Wow.
simplified a whole lot of things that I was surrounded with. And
So a bit
yeah,
like kind of subtractive EQing of your life in a
it
way,
seems
really, and
like,
seeing what
yeah,
you can take
yeah.
away.
Yeah, no, it seems like that, and it's 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 a little bit scary concept because yeah, you can also go to much crazy different waypoints. You can doom some of your projects maybe if you're not careful with how how free you want to feel about certain things or certain moves. But I mean, where's the right and wrong kind of like line that separates all of that? I mean, even if you're doing bigger projects, they all have same level of, you know, dangers of different formats. So you're just like switching lanes of the same thing. So I'll rather trust my own failures and learn on them than just like expecting a lot of things to be like I think what's the opposite of being spontaneous is like being, a psycho planner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Being like completely contrived almost,
yeah,
really,
yeah, yeah.
or
So
headed in.
there's a balance that leans towards the innocence a little bit more is always kind of the better, more humane choice towards something that's as beautiful as creativity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's got to be the initial spark, hasn't it? The impulse, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Really, that kind of just drive that idea and your response to that idea, really, isn't it? And just how you channel that energy and how you channel that inspiration and that creativity.
Yeah, so I think that led me to oh well, this track is 10, 11 years old and it's been unreleased. Oh well, let's put it out. Do you feel it sounds okay? Well, I'm a very harsh person to myself, but I feel like, with extra ears around me, like I even went with I finished this yesterday to my friend because he haven't heard it before. It's like, "Oh, yeah, it's cool." I'm like, "No, it's been done 11 years ago, but thank you for doing a little bit trickery and
Brilliant.
see what happens because people perceive it based on data. That's really weird.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
broke that part apart and I said like, here's a bunch of fresh demos. Um, and then I started like pointing out like after a couple of days, like everyone was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool, that's cool, cool." James was like, "This is cool, this is cool." I was like, "Oh, this is a decade old track."
Wow. Wow.
It
So
helps me.
that
It helps
does.
me realize. It helps me realize like that just really kind of like it's more of a physical manifestation then. I don't know how to describe that feeling, but like when you stop relying on data and all of that, you really focus on listening, I guess.
Yes, definitely. And I think as time goes by, it's harder and harder to stop even looking at the data or even being subliminally influenced by a statistic, a number, whether it's reach or like a date or,
It's
kind of
very
equality
psychological.
or anything. Yeah, 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 totally. But this really excites me because I had a choice before we did this interview. I
Hmm.
either spent hours going over all our old interviews, going right the way back to 2012, and trying to decipher what the narrative was of Nomad's Revenge and Lands Unbreached and Blockfield and all of these things that we've spoken about at length over the years, over like almost 15 years of interviewing you. Or do I just go in and I don't? And because a lot of stuff leaves my memory the minute I've told it, I've written a feature and then it goes again. I thought, no, I'm going to go in fresh. I'm going to go in fresh and ask where Mirrors fits in with this narrative. But it sounds like you're not so bound because there have been points where we've done interviews and you've fried my brain with your narrative and the world and the universe that you've created within, which has spawned so many concepts. It seems like you've taken a step back from that and you've gone back to much more of a kind of raw creative mindset. And maybe Mirrors doesn't fit in with the chronology of all the other stories that you've told quite so much.
Not necessarily.
Or am I justifying being lazy and not doing my preparation ahead of this interview? Yeah.
No, it was a very spontaneous because I remember when I was like announcing that it's a part of the series of like albums, which is like a bigger cluster of things. So Mirror sits somewhere in the middle of that,
Right.
and so for me to explain what's happening with the cluster is like if it's in the middle, it's going both directions. And its omnipresence is like any character you choose to be can be the thing. So it's open up to the interpretation in the literal narrative of every single thing. Even the formatting of the album has done that you can listen it from both sides. The other side, like the mirror text is flipped, so you have to perceive yourself as a mirror image instead of a real person. And like it begs the question about what do we seek for? Like, do we seek for protagonist or antagonist? It's a very deep like self-analysis kind of part that actually is sitting in the middle between the stories before the stories continue in the future. But it's a central point where we never actually met an antagonist in the entire narrative. So this is our first time to
Right.
see, to decipher whether the Mirror Man, whose character is always changing, is actually a protagonist or an antagonist in itself, in its nature, or in its history. And
Wow.
how to explain, like, H.P. Lovecraft, like indescribable thing that can be an indescribable terror or like or actually some human element to it, or maybe both, is like, I think most of the, alienish stuff and concept that we saw in the 70s from Ridley Scott, end of 70s, was like when Giger pulled out a alien face that doesn't have a face, and therefore it became like a very scary concept, open to
Mm.
interpretation. Or John Carpenter, where it took The Thing, like facelessness creates, crazy terror interpretations in each one's head. Therefore, the
Yeah.
whole, idea of what in, what is a scary concept is really kind of open. And
Yeah.
I started really being fascinated by what do we even search in faces, even when we see a bad guy, like, where we like as we start to try to understand, like we saw Joker, but we see in his film, like we see a downfall of how he became to be that face that we know.
Mm.
um Perhaps it is a demise of certain elements that actually led someone to lunacy. It is like villains are very interesting always to write about. Like when you look at the films, to have a really good film, you have to have a really good villain.
Yeah.
um so I was really captivated by that. But I was also exploring the idea of we don't always need to have this whole yin and yang kind of thing in our films. Like I don't think why we need to base the entirety of it on like the bad guy has to exist so the good guy can win, and we all have go to our homes after cinema and be like, yay, the day is saved.
Yeah.
This is why Steven Spielberg succeeded and Stanley Kubrick was left there in confusion, because people ask more questions. But this is the type of film I really like. Um, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
where it's shades of grey, it's nuances that one moment somebody could be the most duplicitous asshole in the story, and then suddenly show a good deed or do something to help someone, whether unwittingly or not. And I think when we explore the concept of the bad person, the baddie, in that way, and baddie has become like a kind of byword alongside brat and stuff like that in recent times, because I mean we can all see now, and veils have been lifted, on social media and on internet, to actually show, like, kind of just how awful some people who are running, particular countries are and have always been, and how bad politics are. So we're seeing through where there is less control of information if we wish to seek the truth in that type of way. And I think we all play with the idea of baddie since being children, when you're playing like war or cops and robbers. And I appreciate that might have been very, very different for you growing up. It 100% would have been very, very different for you growing up in, like, a mid-war yourself. But that
mhm.
kind of safe playing with the concept of being a bad guy, and exploration of morality, really, I think starts at a very young age in that type of sense, doesn't it? A curiosity about the bad guys, like cops and robbers, in that type of way, or kind of anything which is a cat and mouse or a black and white scenario in that type of way.
Speaking of that, on that exact point of cat and mouse, like this is why Blade Runner, the first one, was confusing. Like people were expecting. I remember when as a kid, like it didn't deliver the things you would expect from films. This is why it flopped as well. This is what I read just a day ago. It's like people were expecting when Harrison Ford was in it, people expecting him to be, the main character. You
Mm-hmm.
know, turns out he was kind of almost like kind of in a wrong and not knowing where he is, why he is there, and what is his purpose. And then you have a guy who we constantly had feared, turn out to be, someone who ends up like Rutger Hauer did amazing job of actually portraying um a will to survive instead
Yeah.
of being a bad guy. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
There was so much more to
yeah,
it than being a bad guy,
yeah.
wasn't it? There was a real determination,
And
and
everybody
yeah,
was
just
like, there was so many questions around that after like that when you watch that, he just like falls asleep. And you're like, wow, there's so many ways to look at this now, right? Like what?
yeah,
So in that sense. really, I really just wanted to kind of like break the fourth wall with what you see in specific things, like with the characters, and just lose their faces or I put them in a very specific Rorschach text for to open up to so many interpretations what the bad guy is, who are we looking at? And it's a little bit of a mystery, of course. Like this is why I haven't wrote an an insane level of story for this album is I wrote for Afterburner part and few others, but not really in its entirety the way Nomad's Revenge was presented, for example.
Yeah.
I really like the idea that each track had one interpretation of the face, but the whole album um, has a really interesting design for the vinyl cover. It's basically a very bleak outline, but the entire vinyl is cover is that what do you call it, like mirrorish, like reflective material. So
All
basically,
right.
when you hold a vinyl like this, your face accidentally aligns with the entire thing. You become the part of the actual reflection. You literally become
Brilliant.
the artwork. Like hoping you will find yourself on the cover instead of my artwork is actually a really kind of hard task. So we had to do
Yeah.
different tests. But yeah.
Wow. That's brilliant. And I love that. I mean, have you got a working copy of that? Is the vinyl available quite yet, or is this
No, no,
something that's
yeah,
going to come
yeah,
out
no, yet.
afterwards?
We've been doing tests, and vinyl is going to take a little bit of time to just
Hmm.
get all of that. But we're already like had this kind of a prototype and testings and everything, and it was like, okay, yeah, it works. Like, and if it works, then we're gonna do it. And that was the one that decided why I want all of these like Rorschach tests and all of that, like constantly, like because you can't do it on internet, right? This is a physical manifestation. You can just like turn
Yeah.
everyone's camera against their will. They want to look at an artwork they see themselves. That would be ideal, but too much hacking. But what else you can do is I had to find an alternative. The alternative to actually have those like faces with so many different alterations. But oh yeah, I mean, this was the one that was kind of doing that, and I was like,
Right. Okay, go on.
yeah, that was a little test. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
What's it like? It must have been fun because it doesn't happen very often. Labels don't have very much budgets. Times are hard, as everybody knows. But to be able to do that, to be able to experiment with materials, to talk about formats, to kind of play around with concepts. You've worked on lots of different labels and stuff like that. Imagine this is the first time you've been presented with an opportunity that you can really do something quite different there. So how's it been kind of working with Evolution Chamber?
Well, amazing because Evolution Chamber really like James really cares about like experimenting with certain elements, and I always was the a little bit rebellious towards the like against the standardizations of certain elements of drum and bass. It's not
Mm,
something that people aim towards like or enforces, like but it happens in every culture and normalization of certain standards. Like it's not really a kind of a matter of trend, and it's also taste is not up to discussion. But like we all come from understanding that music definitely in its own core has to be experimental, and we remember drum and bass to be one of those, as I like to say, elements of surprise where you really don't know what is going to happen. So the more you enforce this kind of thing, the more you end up with interesting results who are going really different places. So sometimes it's really hard to actually like put some of those tracks because they would vary very aggressively. And in if you as an artist have a vision to have like them on and under one package, it's really like it gets, of course, complicated to negotiate with labels. So this is where James came in and it was like, yeah, just put it out there. I'm like, okay, really? Yeah. Like, is this what you think you should be doing? And that's a really good thing. He asks me, do I believe in it? So it certainly
Yeah.
means that every label is willing to do something, and as long as um, you trust yourself with it, as long as you're mature enough to understand how much knowledge, and sometimes I would be honest, like sometimes I don't know, like let's find out, this is I think we're lacking risk taking, and this is very
Massively.
refreshing for me, to do this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, would you do this weird thing with the what do you think about the vinyl artwork? And we're like, oh shit, this is crazy. Um, so it was yeah, it's always liberating. That's what it is. And James is a long friend of mine as well. Aside of that, like we know each other since he was on my debut that I had in the UK. That was 2010, I think, in Volks, Brighton.
Oh wow, wow, wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so this was like the
Rise
Overtech
Audio,
days and
Rise
stuff
Audio
like that.
show at Volks, and they
Wow.
were they came because I already had some first releases at his and Ian's like friendship labels, like Close to Death and Overtech. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were running them together, I think. So yeah, that's where we met, and everything else was kind of history. We would meet here and there, just a very nice journey between people who have mutual respect for things they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I share a similar journey with James myself as well in that type of way. I want to come back to the lack of risk taking because this is
Hmm.
something that's inherently, this is a huge topic for me. This is something that drives me with one more thing.
Mm.
In that, like I get feedback from the artists that I'm working with that nobody else is doing what I'm doing, and that's great. That's what I want really because all I see is a conservatism, not just in drum and bass, but certainly within drum and bass, a conservatism with kind of. It doesn't matter how exciting a label release is if they're all presented with really really similar kind of aesthetics and look, and it's all uniform. It immediately, in that kind of psychological way of us responding to data, I'm immediately turned off by conservatism and uniformity and the fact that things seem to kind of tick so many boxes. And I don't want this to turn into anything that's too critical or controversial or kind of, like actually kind of calling out any labels or anything. But
Yeah.
in general, I think the lack of risk taking, I think you probably identified that and you've been talking about that long before I was picking up on that as a journalist working for UKF. I think I was in a mainstream world for quite some
Mm.
time. I'm really enjoying bringing underground artists like yourself onto the website, but I was operating in a very commercial kind of sector or culture, really in that type of way. But I think the lack of risks that are being taken, that's I think something that's kind of driven you right since the start and something that you've observed longer than other people have perhaps maybe did you feel that like years ago?
Well, I wasn't aware of, well, when you're younger, you really don't care like about specific things, and just like you
Yeah.
really kind of trust your feelings and put them in front of everything else. When it becomes a bigger portion of your life where you actually want to create results with it and you still have time for music or making music your primary objective in life to be, like all encompassing stuff, because who doesn't like to work for life with something they love, you know? So
Yeah.
it goes with it's a very ethical question, and I think it comes individually, even in front of these like companies and corporations who have to obey certain laws to actually be able to provide salaries.
Yeah.
So you have this really weird juxtaposition of it. You're making what you love at the cost of stripping it down and simplifying it so it creates enough results, right? So you have that side, or you're making what you love and you're going to take risks, but you have to surround yourself with people who are going to support you with those risks and take the same risks with you and see what
Mm.
happens. It's a very like an investor would be like, I'm not sure about these guys. They don't really plan anything. They're very spontaneous. It's very messy on papers. There's not much research about this. This is a proven model. It shows graphs, it shows all of that, but it kills everything else, life and creativity.
Yeah, we go back to relying on the data then, and it is. It's
Yeah.
these are the two worlds in which we live, and you've just literally described one more thing with that description about being spontaneous, and not having any research or anything like that, really. And I think, but you need that. You need that kind of chaos just within art and within creativity anyway, really. But I imagine anyone who's got some type of business acumen or understands how economics works and stuff would always kind of back the safer option, really. And perhaps the two need each other. They do. Well, I know that the conservative one exploits the chaotic one, but then the chaotic one is quite often bankrolled every now and again by the conservative one.
Well, here's the thing, like even those big corpos are searching for those two guys in the garage who make stuff like not knowing what they have, you know.
Mm.
And the problem with them is they want to mold these guys into something that is, solid. But at the end of the day, like the standardization is the problem. The standardization is that what drags the whole thing longer than it should, until the competition arrives. We need more competitive big platforms and small platforms because one platform monopoly can destroy entire ecosystems. And 10 years later, we all have similar phones, same camera side. Everything has to be like this because that's what people feel is the most comfortable thing. We shouldn't allow this kind of model thinking to happen to music. Music should be, self discovery through other people's canvases and paintings.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. So how do we get out? Because we're hurtling more and more and more towards that because of the way that the world is working.
Well, it's a full cycle. It really is. It's a full cycle. Like this is not just. It's in between industrial revolutions and renaissances, but we had more than one renaissance. We learned about one in a book, but we had so many of them. Sometimes it's with formats. Sometimes it's like, with technological breakthroughs. Sometimes it's like with, jilted generation. And I think
I was just about to say, was the early 90s a renaissance in that type of way? The birth of rave, jungle, all the use of technology and everything like that, really. I mean, that felt like looking back now, that ticks all of the boxes of what a renaissance would be.
I believe so. I believe that there is a specific comeback that has lots of independence woven into it, which is a really cool thing because we have a specific chaotic or slash dying. I don't know really if they're dying, but like social networks and the new generations appearing on places like Discord. I have like a insane amount of Discord, like members available at any point, but that I don't have on Facebook, for example, or Instagram even. So yeah, it's perpetual. I'm not mentioning TikTok because it's a different format, different standards, different demands. But I don't believe that you need to be also accustomed to every single type of social network behavior. I don't want to be a clown on TikTok to sell few tracks, right? So like I think we're marching towards a generation who does not want to obey these specific rules. And why did they choose Discord, for example, is because you don't have this kind of set of behaviors necessary to be there. You just, meet friends and talk, and that's pretty much it. This is how I remember some of the places we were. Like this, I remember MySpace first, or ICQ,
AOL,
AOL. where I met a lot of
Forums
people.
even in that type of way, like literally just set up for discussion, and that
Yeah,
was that really in
exactly.
that type of way. Yeah. I was
Exactly.
going to ask about how is your community going with Cyber Nero in general, really, and Discord is something we've got a Discord, and I always want to kind of develop it, but it involves a lot of effort and a lot of time. And then you end up getting lazy. It's like, well, I'll just post this on Instagram or I'll post this on Facebook. I'll
Hmm.
get used to that. And I love the idea, though, of Discord in the way that it is purely there to create a space for people to share ideas and do whatever they like. There doesn't seem to be an agenda. You don't feel quite as much of a statistic, a user, a demographic, like data to be sold to another company when you're using Discord.
It's really about the creativity there. Like there's people doing all kinds of stuff on the Cyber group server, uh, because that's where I kind of, how to say it, like that's where I kind of described it as such, as a format, which is audiovisual. So it attracted a lot of interesting creative minds that became friends overnight, honestly, like because I was able to um, provide answers to some random production questions, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 months ago, I wanted to get into 3D modeling, and it just happens to be one of the 3D modelers there. I was like, oh, yeah, take plasticity. Here's it. Like, a couple of weeks later, I'm learning 3D modeling, and I'm getting like to know all the basics and everything. So, like that's why it's beneficial to be in a functioning community of creatives that are not separated by ads, you know, um,
Yeah.
or a specific, shadow banning based on the countries and differences and all of that. So it's liberating. So hats off to the liberation of the whole, everything that's underground and all of that, because people in that, this is the electric era of rave culture, I guess, the digital rave moment, because you get to see a bunch of people you would see maybe, in tunnels, in abandoned tunnels in Bristol, people moving sound systems around, because they're been chased by police, like noise complaints, all of that, and they just move to the other location. That's, if you digitize that, you see the similar thing with the social networks. So the parallels there,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rebellion is there, and you're like, okay, this is definitely a cycle.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. And there is, I mean, it's a knee-jerk reaction to whatever's going on, really. And the next generation kind of want to put their own stamp on it in that type of way. Or there's only so much control. I think it was only ever going to reach like a kind of boiling point, really, on other social media networks where you can see people saying, I'm not using this anymore, or becoming less and less active. And like you said, right at the start, about we're becoming less reliant on certain things in order to get our messages out there or to sell whatever it is, our art or, kind of our output, our releases and stuff. And I think is that, yeah, it's definitely a kind of generational thing. Do you think then, this is totally off the top of my head, because it does kind of feel like, and especially talking to and working with a lot of people who are half my age, like early 20s, even late teens and stuff, that we're going through that, this almost seems like every 30 years. Like I went through it in the 90s, and now we're kind of, and my dad went through that in the 60s, and now in the 2020s, we kind of seem to be back in that. Do you think there's, do you think you could actually put an algorithm or some type of formula on it and boil it down to numbers and data, this kind of cyclical flow that we have?
It's a quantum thing. It's like I call those two guys in the garage Schrödinger guys. They're there, they're not there, but they're there until
Hmm.
not observed. Building
Yeah.
something new, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's about that. And, it really depends on that whole individualism. Are they going to be what the foundation of huge, are they going to be gentrified? Yeah, that's the thing. You
Yeah.
look at Steve Jobs, he was just a nerd out there, right? And then he was like, I want everyone to obey only my laws. And this is where you stop being a nerd and start being, a very centered personality. When you want to have a cult of personality and you want to disclose any potential competitive threat, so to speak, which empowers, like competition and everything around that empowers inventions. So that's why I say this, from a nerd guy to a very corporate, like, personality, gentrification in itself, in its own nature, is absolute hell. And I think we leave those two guys inventing as long as they can and hope that their outcome is going to be something along the line of Liam Howlett and Keith Flint and, guys who said no to the big guys,
Yeah,
in suits, and
yeah,
just pursue to show that they can do it by themselves. Or let's say Robert Del Naya, people who said we're self-sufficient. Thank you very much for the offer. We have it locked. You know,
yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I hope for the cycles.
Well,
That's going to give this kind of a bunch of nerds, perpetually, who do not need specific acquisitions, to so to speak, for life. You know.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, I'd say, in that kind of way that you are one of those Schrodinger's garage guys and always have been in that type of way. You've been tinkering away, doing things, going against the grain in so many different ways. And what was beautiful in recent times, so I think this is going to come out early September, just a few days after the release, but literally a couple of weeks ago, seeing photos of you at Let It Roll and stuff, and like kind of seeing like, kind of being really, really excited for you and really proud because knowing that that's kind of like, you should have been on that stage years and years ago, but seeing like, kind of seeing you get your flowers in that type of way, to use a crude phrase, really. But I would say you have been one of those garage guys tinkering away for so long in that type of way. And then, kind of the way that you've branched out into so many different things and your time out in Japan and the friends that you've made and all of the different formats that you've explored, the mediums that you've explored. You're one of those guys.
Well, if you think that, I really appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, like I wrote on my I took this photo of Let It Roll stage, and I thought to myself, like, this feels like Hireth was a nostalgia about the place you never been to. There's
Yes.
that terminology, and
It's a Welsh
I
word.
certainly felt like, okay, this is like seeing an old friend you haven't seen for a while, but you know something for so long, and you really try to show your set of knowledge and share your knowledge as well for the with the festival, which is sometimes really hard because lots of things need to align first for things to happen, even accidentally. It just happens to be that the album aligned with the label aligned with the festival aligned with me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm lucky this year. What the hell? Yeah, it happened like that, literally.
Brilliant. How was it?
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. I
Ah,
really wanted to showcase lots of stuff because I've been building up not just one album, like it's just a full folder of stuff that I've been messing around, and with no, dates in sight. So aside of the album, of course, I presented the whole mirror to the mix as much as I could, and also like bringing some other tracks to um showcase. But honestly, when I was aware of this imminent Let It Roll show, I even pressed hard to produce two additional tracks just for presentation of myself on Let It Roll, because I was thinking like, oh, they have a huge sound system. I better make something that's very specifically built for Let It Roll, like, and see what
oh,
happens, right?
wow.
I like the idea. I like the idea of like doing sound design and stuff. So, one of my like, you know, uh, aspirations or idea to, is to be able to do some kind of a presentation because for festivals. Let It Roll has their own sound design, kind of presentation of certain things, and I've seen it in the history. And I was like, oh yeah, no, this is I don't know. I wish to do that, because
Mm,
they definitely encourage sound design and all of that. And I think drum and bass is mainly interesting aspect of that because it has that cinematic effect and stuff. And what a better place than to present it on festivals who actually endorse cinematics. Boomtown has a different concept as well. I mean, like Boomtown goes into role playing more than any of other festivals. It's like interesting to see how festivals have
yeah.
different formats of this presentability. So yeah, but yeah, Let It Roll. Let's get back to that one. Like I was able to do that on my own, kind of through the set already for my showcase. Yeah.
That's great. How was it as well? I mean, I guess that, you design these tracks to go through the system, but then you're on the other side of the speakers. You're only hearing it through the monitor. So you
Yeah.
don't really know what that impact is really, or whether it had the intended impact coming through that system.
Aside for from low frequencies that you can partially feel, coming through the stage, but we also like I asked for specifics about the visuals, whether screen size and stuff, which the VJ has actually provided me with. So we built some specific evolution chamber stuff in FL Studio, like triggered by a BPM, and we were then I came up with like 70 plus videos that we can showcase and lots of mine stuff and lots of the other people because this was a shared stage with all the homies that I haven't seen or I haven't met before,
Yeah.
for the same day. It was like Spore, Face, Matthews. Like I haven't seen Matthews for 10 years, I think. Like we've been talking, but I
Wow.
haven't seen him for 10 years. We were like first we were like, "Oh man, I missed you. Oh, I missed you too." There was that thing, and then I took all of these things in account because like it was the evolution takeover stage. So I felt like okay, we should have the original idea is like ideally I should have two laptops. One would be running live, triggering live visuals as well. But ended up in the very capable hands of the Let It Roll VJ there, and he actually did a lot of these like interesting visuals for the stage too. The reaction was nice. It was a lot of people, and I saw the stories. There was a lot of people actually some of them knowing the IDs or chasing the IDs of certain tracks even from previous mixes from Dark Sharon studio. I was like, okay, yeah, people are really curious about where when and where these going to be, you know out as tracks and stuff and what part of. So yeah, like if you leave people with enough questions and then surprise elements in the set, I mean you get yourself, people with a lot of questions in the inbox and stuff like. So that's really a good, really good feedback.
Yeah. I mean, were there, besides the tracks that you produced specifically for the festival, were there any tracks from Mirror that you were particularly excited or perhaps a little bit nervous of dropping or really interested to see what the reaction might be? Was there anything that you kind of road testing right until this last point? Because playing to crowds like that, even when you're at a very significant status within your career, they happen once or twice a year, maybe, those type of gigs are really, really special. So
So
were there
this
any
is
kind of tracks on the album that you were really excited about and nervous to drop?
this is a really good situation to ask because a lot of my task tracks have like a specific different. I'm trying to bring back this kind of weird anticipation. You have a very specific model of mixing nowadays where your mix has to be a very continuous thing with not much pauses and stuff. When I, on the contrary, try to build up very interesting and cinematic, I've been always kind of doing that, but never really enforcing too much on mix because I was afraid to have too much pauses between the tracks, you
Yeah.
know? So people start dancing and then like, okay, now waiting, then dancing, then waiting. So sometimes that can backfire. So I was really trying to pick up like whether people in the crowd are want more to hear also the build-ups and stuff or not. Like that's a hard one to actually just like really kind of see how it goes. But if you see
Oh
that you have
yeah.
your 100% fan base, you definitely can do more free things, you know. So, but you have to have like a communication with the crowd, of course, like, you know, um, but not at the sacrifice of education, you know. I think
Yeah.
you should do mixes where there's something that they never heard before, and that something does not necessarily need to be a totally new sound. Sometimes totally new sound is actually giving them a few more interest to just enjoy music, you know, or hearing a narrative. So I don't know if they call this old school type of mixing where you have too many pauses, but honestly, there's part of me just where I just stopped caring. I was like, I feel like just it's music. Just you know,
Yeah.
it's music. Why are we going into like I'm literally at a stage where like why are we going into philosophy of this? Like this is music, you know? It's like trying it's like buying a popcorn and you know it's popcorn. All of a sudden they all have to have like a specific set of demands for you to be consuming them. It's popcorn, you know? As
Yeah,
simple
yeah,
as
yeah,
that.
completely,
Like trying to
completely.
remind myself most of the time, even during sets, that it's okay is the sign of a good, you know, mindset to myself. If I'm going into some sense of stress of thinking like or overthinking, how do you do this? So that's a little bit of a, you know, trying to tell people, listen, yeah, it's a standard. It's probably a standard to play even drum and bass at 178, 180, you know, but it's also okay to do this and this in this way. And, you know, this is what differentiate artists as well. So that's what we want. If you put a
Yeah, yeah,
standard,
yeah, yeah.
you have a standard for sound, you have a standard for mixing, you will create people who who keep those standards so high level in indefinitely like in detailed and strict that you will stop differentiating them. That's
Yeah.
the problem with it.
And it creates that uniformity, that conservatism that I referred to before.
Exactly.
Really well known younger kind of headliner who bursted through a few years ago told me in an interview, I won't mention their name, not because I don't, I did disagree with them, but it was just, I think it would be a shame to bring in their name because it's out of context. But they said that, if you're watching the next guy do it at that level and get success at that level, why wouldn't you copy what he's doing, but try and do it better? And that felt like when he explained it to me, it's like it makes perfect sense, but that seems completely alien to me. But that's the standard, really. It's been the standard in because certain mixing techniques, and I'm pretty sure I've spoken to you about this in terms of like arrangement before. Like DJing ruined the arrangement of drum and bass and jungle records to a certain degree because the
Mm.
minute producers understood or because producers DJ'd themselves, it's like, right, okay, we've got a 16 there, a 32 there, then you have a breakdown, then you have this, and so many different things are kind of made to tailor for mixing, and they have to because the DJs are the ones playing it out. But it also compromises then on those kind of free form aspects, which I mean, Mirrors is rife with. There's like 3 or 4 different kind of genres within a tune sometimes, really, and stuff that can
But
start incredibly beautiful ends up incredibly twisted, or the other way around, really. And
yeah,
those shock and awe tactics don't quite happen as much because of the mix and the focus on making things good for Andy C to play, for example, or insert other headliner here. But
but you know
generally
what the
speaking,
paradox in that is? Like all these demands to have a shorter intros or specific longer tracks or shorter tracks, while you have the most sophisticated technology that DJ culture has ever seen. So when they ask me
yeah,
like, "Oh, can you make an intro shorter?" I'm thinking you have the most powerful, insane CDJ in your hands, which allows you to have a cue points per 1 millisecond, you know, on the desired place where you want to start playing. why don't you just, have it prepared in a friendly manner to your preference? This is a customizable track. If I give more to the track, it opens up more doors. Some people will love long intros, other can make them shorter, cut them up, like put cues on a place where they want to start playing from.
Yeah.
So why are we having this conversation? This is like literally like a, you know, when I'm thinking about, whether I should negotiate specific things about like how to submit today demos in today's world and stuff. So this is why a lot of homies that arrived in the server love me for. I'm glad everyone's on this page because they expect treatment when they send demos like, oh, you should make this shorter, you should make this longer. I'm like, no, it's fine. Do you think it sounds fine? Yeah, it sounds fine. Like
This goes back to, kind of what James was asking you, and it's a question I ask my artists as well.
simplification.
Are you happy? Are you happy with it as an artist? Because they're fundamentally, instead of kind of changing it or making it more accessible. And I read somewhere about it was somebody who writes a lot of kind of content or programs for Netflix, and there was one negotiation that they had where a few executives were like, can somebody watch this while they're doing the ironing or doing the dishes? I was like, well, I'm not writing it. I'm not writing this for somebody who's not concentrating on it. I know we all have background telly on, whether it's news or a game show or Simpsons or, kind of anything like that. We have some background things on we're concentrating, but you should never be writing for those people who aren't concentrating. It's kind of dumbing down in that type of way, really. And you're absolutely right. Like DJ technology, having come back into it 10 years after a 10-year break, the amount that you can do, if you've got the patience and you could do the admin and all of the preparation, I don't, but just the very ability to loop things and live remix while you're doing things and to change to certain aspects of, segments of the track. This is the type of stuff that me and my friends would talk about and daydream about during a session at 7 a.m. 20 years ago. Like, imagine if you could do this, at the push of a button, or you'd be able to manipulate your music like this. This is the type of shit. This was the future that I was talking about when I was a teenager.
Hey, you get a track that has a long intro that you can mix with something else, so you can even open your set. You get a whole drop. You get a breakdown. You have a drop that's different than the first drop. That's a 4-track for a family of 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
I mean, like, versus a simplification of so much DJ friendly kind of tool that like really kind of takes away all the fun. Um, you know, I'll rather have something that can be listened outside of the prospect of the mix as well, because I think we need to preserve that part of the culture as well. Um, not every track has to be perfectly optimized DJ tool, and if you cannot optimize it, ideally DJ should be the one optimizing it, not the producer. Honestly,
Yes.
about that.
Yeah. I think so.
It's their only job.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's not producer's job. So that stigma about, it's good track, but not good enough. Can you do this for me? Client approach towards artists is absolutely horrendous. And I think needs to be kind of calling out all the labels out there. Don't give more compromises to artists. DJs are the ones who have to make it work. DJs need to be less lazy.
Yes, definitely. And I think as time goes by and generational kind of habits and trends and cultures change, we're not raving so much. We're not raving as much as
I
we
just
used
need
to
to add. I
be.
just need to add. I just need to add this. I remember, like, I was like, how do I mix Nintendo Ichiryu from Photek? Like, and now I thinking right now, like, how would be some label think about this track specifically now, that one that prefers, club tools. I
Yeah,
remember I really
yeah,
wanted to learn it to actually be able to kind of spin it on specific elements there. And this track went all over the place because, it didn't care. So we
yeah,
need that spirit. So I
yeah.
digressed a little bit. So yeah,
No, but
I
you're
just
absolutely
remember
right. And
that
I
random
think,
fact.
yeah, there were like certain records. There's quite a lot of crossed records for me, really. like kind of like Soul in Motion and stuff like that, where if you didn't bring it in at the right time, then it would all be, yeah, you really had to know the music. It would be in on an offbeat if you needed it all to kind of fit in and flow together. And those were the puzzles that I really enjoyed as a young
Yep.
DJ all
Yep.
those years ago, playing with that.
Yep.
It's like, oh, right, okay, that's a tricky one, but I really want to play it, so I'm going to make it work rather than let's make it work for the DJ. Absolutely. And I think, going back to kind of, we shouldn't just, this music isn't just dance music. This music is game music. This music is driving music. This music now, because we're several generations deep, this is music that people put on in the background when they're entertaining guests these days, because we've been growing up with it. This is not strictly for DJs anymore.
It survived because of the diversity. And if we kill diversity, that's the end of an era. That's why I'm so opposed to the idea of setting a trend or standard to such a culture, which with rich history, you know.
Definitely, definitely. And in that way, I mean, what are your favorite compositions? What are your personal favorites on Mirror? And I can tell you a few of mine because I've made some notes. I mean, you've got the really, really playful stuff like Bull Funk and Everybody Sucks, Everybody Fucks and stuff like that, which, just like a really, really good fun kind of tear outs, but done in a very unconventional way. But my favorite one, it's almost got like a kind of, what is it? I've written it down here, Doomed Heart. I mean, it kind of, that pulls on so many different genres in that type of way. There's almost like a kind of metallic kind of feel to it. It has a movement to it in a way. There's like there's so much going on. I mean, that's one of my favorite. The really, while I was sitting there with my headphones on, and it was like, well, what the hell am I listening to several times? Like, it's still this track. Wow, I've got goosebumps now. What are your kind of moments on the album where you've surprised yourself in any way, or kind of really feel like you've hit a spot which you hadn't quite before, or searched for before, but hadn't quite been able to articulate?
Well, from a perspective fresh of pair of fresh ears like yourself, I have to agree on the Doomed Heart being like a specific narrative there that is more of a leaning towards the book, type of thing. Like, let me tell you a story more than anything else. And you can tell there's quite a lot of a sense of this mystery you open up, like MCM or some other like channel that has an anime that has no narrative at all, not specifically known to you, um, and you just dive in without any knowledge. So like I was always wondering like how to create such a track that will drag you in without any explanation, any also club explanation. The club explanation being a specific beat that is more or less known to us, that guides the way, It's like a guide, it's like a light in there, and you're like, okay, I'm following you. But what if you lose that specifically and becomes a little bit of a more dimmed light and stuff, and you just a little bit, by yourself? This is where you really start exploring by yourself. This is why you then want to come back and want to listen to it more, because it's a natural place to be as an observer. And I think this is like the standpoint where you can just really explore like how people like to immerse themselves by listening to it and what they can discover. It certainly has its own melancholic kind of approach to it. There's a bit of a sadness, there's a bit of a happiness, it's always somewhere in between. There's a similar thing with the Frozen Wind, but Frozen Wind then switches onto a more rhythmical thing. So it does have a guide, which is then like transformed into some kind of a power or desire of or like someone getting accustomed to fight for something, like stakes are high and stuff. Like, I mean, when you can provide similar to like Fugitive film, like when you could provide that stakes are high in some way of narrative or one way or the other, whether it's musically or visually or just with the text, you can actually, to everyone that's high sensory or empathic, they can take a bit of that emotion with them. And this is what really makes a track companion, emotional companion for you, whether to lead you through it or I don't know, just like give you an extra memory in your life about because I really it just warms my heart when I get messages that someone was going through specific times in their life listening to this or that track from of mine and tell me that it's been a part of their journey.
Yeah,
This is
yeah. It's the
what
ultimate compliment.
this is a side of and above any graphs. This is what it means to feel that you've done a specific successful story, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that you've really made a connection. You've connected someone right
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
you can't put there's no metric on that. You can't put any type of formula on that. When it comes back to you. And this is a conversation that I have with artists quite often.
This is
And somebody
also a
actually said, we've been
self-reflection,
talking
you
about
know.
their statistics on Spotify. And
Mm.
then they forwarded over a message saying, I don't care about the numbers while I'm receiving stuff like this.
Mm.
And just it wasn't quite that I was going through a hard time type of it was more just a complimentary message. But
Yeah.
even that, when someone takes the time to reach out to you and say something, but I think when people say it's changed their life or it's helped them, that must be the ultimate compliment, that it's attached, that they are now part of that narrative. They're that song and them live together in that type of way, and there's no way that you could ever forecast that in any type of way, really.
It's also self-reflective. I don't know what's about the power of music, and I'll never find out probably because to this day I feel like creating specific tracks where I was really like emotionally invested into them. Actually, it's almost like you are able, and I don't know how. It's such a mystery, but people pick up those moments of yours. It's somehow they get imprinted onto the track and they pick up whether you made them out of like emotion or not. And it's so interesting to see that. So
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, that's the
That's a
alchemy
really
of the
special part
soul
of me.
there,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Yeah. You can't kind of, there is no kind of engineering explanation for it or anything, really. That's our
So
senses
So
working as,
this is why I'm coming from the standpoint of like if you take away this narrative part, whether sometimes it might be only on the intro, like I have very little to say. You know, you give me very little space to say something that's worthwhile in this world that we live in. I mean, you know, this is literally this is literally you want your everyone wants their story and their life and their career to be meaningful. And I think, if you like, labels have to provide space for that, for artists to actually, they have very, like, many of artists are just very introvert people. And if you don't give them space to talk even through the tracks, what is left of them? You
yeah.
know? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
why.
definitely. That is their form of expression. That is so. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been drawn or magnetized towards making music and being creative in the first
Yeah,
place if you didn't want to express yourself
yeah,
in that way. What were you thinking, or what were you expressing? What were you articulating and channeling with Ketchup then? Because I love the playfulness.
yeah.
This is the most playful Billain that we've ever heard before, really, in that type of way. Or most diverse, you're taking us all around to these different places, but you've been very keen, I think, to show us much more of a kind of playful side than
Mm.
perhaps, kind of people have seen before in that way, or in this amount, in these volumes.
Well, it's a slice of comedy because if I'm doing a mirror, a self-reflective, analysis of everyone else through the artworks and stuff with all these Rorschachs and in reflective surfaces, I'm also have to be honest with myself. I'm a comedic person, like I'm, in every sense of nerdism and many other aspects. So, I have a slice of comedy of my own from, everything sucks on one side and then catch up on the other because they have like amount of the tracks going from back. The idea from the album is like you can that's why the intro is on the end and the outro is on the first track. The idea of the album is like you can listen from the other way around and
You
still
could literally fold it like that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
listen the other way around and still feel like it's a normal order of the tracks. So that was crafted like um in that way And then
Right. So if I have a look at where the actual placement of the tracks, I've still got the album up here. So right. So
yeah,
ESAF is that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the fifth track. And then if I count up, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 catch up. Right. Okay. Okay. Cool. So Timeless Mirror and Afterburner are reflections of each other, or corresponding in one way or another, or have something to say to each other.
it's like what you call it. I forgot the meaning of it, but the idea was that the third dream there as a third album, like there's a sequence of these like dreamy atmospheric tracks. That track is the actual middle of it. And
I was just trying to work out what the middle was. It must be Third Dream,
yeah,
10-minute opus. Of course, that's going to
yeah,
be
yeah.
the pivot point,
And then
really,
you
isn't it?
have like, okay, why not slices of comedy? I'm sorry for going too much into structure of it. So the catch up itself is very accidental. Pretty much like everything sucks was pretty accidental. I thought about the yeah, I thought about the very interesting like silly. I had Baka at Vision, and then I had Suka Punch and Raku, and I like the sequence of these like interesting like halftime tracks because my history is also bound to hip hop producing as a beat maker to many local MCs and in the region. So I always like to, just refresh my memory with this type of production. So Catch Up was one of them. And the accident part is where I have this vocal in the background cutting up in a in slogans or vowels, and ended up with accidental guys sounding like saying like "Don't eat ketchup," and I was like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna call it that way. And to my surprise, everyone in the server I was streaming. Like sometimes I stream tracks that I'm producing on Cybernura server, and just people started spamming with like funny ketchup like memes and videos and gifs, and
Brilliant.
suddenly there's someone made a small animation of a ketchup chasing people, and I'm like, okay, this is a track, I guess.
Oh, brilliant. Go on. That's amazing. Then by then
It's
it's out of your hands. It's out,
some
that
of the,
they've
yeah, some
helped you
of them
develop it in
become
that
like
way.
if you're in that room with everyone, they become accidentals. Like, and Boomba was like that on Vision. It was like, oh, I don't know. We had a joke, and all of a sudden, people made the Roombas with like guns and knives, and like killer Roombas, like chasing people on the apartment. I was like, okay, man, I can't. I am not in control of naming these tracks anymore, and it's just so funny. But
That's
I love
great.
this group energy of people. Sometimes when we like when I'm streaming this, so like I really try to support that spirit, I guess. Yeah,
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 definitely.
yeah.
That's great. I mean, having a community, I think community is probably one of the most overused words at the moment. And I don't, like community is essential, and it's but I think like people have just kind of commodified that or want to use that word because they know that community is actually going to be one of the kind of saviors of
Of course.
humanity in
Yeah, yeah,
terms of kind of actual socialism, like as in social, like, that the clue is in the word there, people
yeah,
helping
yeah.
each other out and putting aside their ego and putting aside greed and stuff like that. But community is such a massive thing. And I think you've always been looking for your people, really, haven't you? Like, if you think about, like, the kind of artifacts that you've been leaving around for years and years and years, they are to connect with particular people and stuff. You've found your tribe, or you've cultivated, you've magnetized your tribe, really, in that type of way.
I don't strive towards unavailability as an artist. No matter how big I get into whatever the type of career it happens to be, because it's I don't know, it's one of those viewpoints where you appreciate that these people were with you through any like all good and bad times. And you know, what business model can you possibly offer me that gives me that kind of joy? There is no such thing, a concept. I don't really believe in that. I really believe that I grew up on this whole rave movement, even in Sarajevo, when the war war walls tore down. It's almost like a liberation of Berlin Wall. Like people just
Mm.
joined. There was a surge of music of all kinds, um, and it was such a interesting thing to even look at from the side. I was like, what, 14, 15? And I had my first show when I was 16 years old on a laptop with like Rebirth, like live performing a techno set. And nobody asked questions, nothing. It's like, oh, you play, like let's just go. And there was, all of a sudden they have that same kind of premise of I'm this guy, nice to meet you, there's no questions asked, and then that it works, and people want to exchange knowledge, and people want to exchange good moments, and people want to generally become friends and learn from each other and all of that. So I don't think there is a single business model in today's world of industry or of any kind that can actually benefit from you if you just cut down all that meaning from your artist persona. And I think
Massively.
this is a big distance that you never should cut off. Um, and I don't know. Like I mean, I can only speak from the standpoint of my own kind of experience, but I really have one gut feeling. And when we opened up these like no knowledgeable discussions, it always comes to the same conclusion that the thing that we remember the most is from because of the interactions and just really kind of very human openness to things, and appreciation of art. So that's why
Absolutely.
it's really important to
Absolutely.
stay like in loop with everyone and just really kind of even have jokes and everything. Just the like remove the ego from that whole kind of like, oh, do you know who I am? Like I really don't believe in that.
Oh man, massively, massively. And I think that's something that's become a lot more apparent within our genre and our culture than it was, when we first started talking in 2011, 2012. I think, which, yeah, again, I don't think it's part of your story, so it's not something that I wish to dwell upon, but it's definitely something that's become a lot more rife as drum and bass has got bigger and more commercial in that type of way. But I think fundamentally what I take from that, and it's something that I always say to a lot of people, whether it's in an interview like this or whether it's when I'm like talking to artists or mentoring anyone, is have faith in the audience. When people start talking about having a different alias for a different sound, it's like, no, release what you want to release, and your real fans, the people who you've been honest with and engaged with and have developed a faith in you, you should have the same level of faith in your audience. Like if you want to take your music in a slightly different direction or say something else, the people who really believe in you, which are also the people who might buy something on Bandcamp Friday or subscribe to Patreon or be a member of your Discord and contribute, and not just be a passive receiver of music, or just a free streamer in that type of way, are going to understand, or at least go, right, okay, wow, right, wasn't expecting that, that's really interesting, or not my favorite one of yours, but I'm still going to pay attention because I know the
Yeah.
next one is going to be interesting.
It's
And I think it's
certainly a
having faith in
longer
your audience, really, isn't it? Faith
Well,
in your
it
community.
takes a longer path for you to develop the career, but people stay longer with you. It's just
Yeah,
very simple. You don't get exchanged by another product. You don't become a product on the shelf between two different milks, you know, and you lost yourself in there with a different type of discounts. You're not there. You're not,
yeah,
on a shelf in Tesco, just really being just another chocolate bar. And for you to rebrand yourself to stand out, it's not just a matter of like who has the shiniest packaging from the outside or, weirdest thing. It just takes you, a little bit of a different path, and you might never end up on that same shelf, but that is actually a good thing. That's what
yeah,
I'm trying to say. You know, to
definitely.
be outside of that shelf, which is overcrowded with very specific models of the same.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
necessarily like that these things are bad. I'm just saying that like if everyone would individually just really believe in themselves more, they would rely less on the things that promise standardization, which is not good. People should be their own standards, and with all their good and bad things, they will be taken for what they are if they're not lazy. That's all there is. And this,
Yes.
of course, this is a slow process, but such is life. Like, I mean, being able to do what you like, being able to do this podcast, being able to do this album, being like is honestly at this point a blessing.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fingers crossed for everything else.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think both of our careers are a kind of example of that. Of this is the long game. We're both in a similar kind of age. You're about kind of almost 10 years younger than me, I think,
Hmm.
but we're of a similar kind of demographic, and that we've both been on this
Hmm.
for this amount of time. And like I still don't feel like I've peaked in any way, or there are moments where it's like, wow, I didn't expect that to happen in my career, and like yourself and Let It Roll and stuff like that. Like it isn't a young person's game; it's a consistent person's game,
Yeah.
and I think an honest and disciplined and dedicated person's game. Really, it should be. It isn't always, and money can give you all types of shortcuts in that type of way, and the mainstream can. But I've seen so many different careers come and go over the time where I've been specializing on drum and bass, where we've been talking, but go back to 2004, my first journalism job. So many careers have come and gone in that, and I think it's
No,
consistency,
this
kind of
I- I-
endurance, really.
money cannot shape personality. I stand with that.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
pretty much like where the difference comes in. And that's the only thing I'm really gonna be very like stubborn about. But money certainly cannot shape personality. It can shape a very specific type, but not like the most different types. You know,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just one.
I think it can open doors or put people in certain
Yeah,
positions, but whether you're able
certainly,
to cling on to that position is another
certainly.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, what comes next for you, really? Now, what comes next? This is the worst question because Mirror isn't even out yet. But are you part of Evolution Chamber now as part of the crew? Is this a one-off? And what I
No,
love is the
this
fact that your narrative has gone through so many labels, but it all still corresponds, and not at any point like, yeah, it doesn't matter where you're kind of putting out your art. You work with people who understand you, I think, really. And, whether it's a one-off on Vision or, a series of things on Renraku or now on, on Evolution Chamber, you've stayed consistent with that. And I think, that we've already kind of touched on the people that you work with, but are
I'm
you going to carry on working with James
of
and the crew?
course, but
Brilliant.
in a sense that I prefer friendship over plans or
Yeah.
businesses because if we make friends first, which we are, and we just like grow this whole idea into something bigger, it's going to be only because we don't, you know, go with specific, we don't plan things, but we definitely like grew in friendship, and I met more people. I met Aaron at Ask Horizon, also of Evolution Chamber, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I met so many people that um like, of course, if this means being a part of a crew, yeah, of course, because that's what friendship is about, you know. Um, and that's how I look at it. I don't really, think about specifically, label posse and whole like, things, but
Yeah.
certainly, like we have more than one thing going on now, thanks to just really kind of opening that box that we always wanted to, play with those Legos at the same house, all of that kind of thing,
Yeah.
in that sense of, nerdism. Um, and I don't know where it's gonna lead, but that's the beauty of it. Like it's just spontaneous combustion of creative people who know what they want. And for me, that's just another blessing in the lines of all the things. And where it's gonna
Yeah.
go next is probably gonna be more tracks, of course, more projects of mine as well. Aside of them, there's a few more things that are, you know, coming out of the Cyberneural server is more interesting projects. Kind of too soon to speak about, but they're around the corner, and they're gonna envelop a whole lot of friendships into something that I hope that can, make everyone actually even work, while being creative, which is ultimately everyone's goal. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I've been making I made this one found footage short film, which was like a very mysterious one on my YouTube channel. Looks like a lost tape. Um,
Right, yeah.
and this has been a pilot film for negotiating on further projects and stuff, which is now probably in negotiations to be a bigger film.
Wow.
And I've been finishing one sound design for a short film. There's a lot of stuff. So like there's a lot of next stuff that are around the corner thanks to those deadlines who are always like around here breathing behind your neck. But it's it's fun. And there's a lot of I had several summons. Those are labeled as Billain summons. They removed the bill from my and called them summons. They were basically gathering. We had some people from the server come to my place, and we got a club, and we made a pop up from Cyber Neuro, just like everyone was playing with me, and
Brilliant.
those stuff. Some people stayed at mine like for 3 months and just like exchange knowledge, working with music and all of this stuff. And yeah,
Wow. So like a
very
proper kind of
spontaneous combustions, honestly.
uh,
Like,
I've been holding on to that phrase, spontaneous combustion, to wrap up this interview. I loved it when you said it 5 minutes ago as well. Like, and long may that spontaneous combustion continue. But that's amazing. So people through your community have come literally stayed with you for months. I mean, we're talking like this is like the kind of 60s, 70s kind of hippie commune type of
yeah,
vibe there,
yeah,
really, isn't it? Sick.
yeah, pretty much.
Amazing.
And I don't know. In that process, it's just really kind of fun to make projects with people and artworks and different paintings and graphic design. And I don't know. I'm also trying to be a nice host to show around Sarajevo, to show some nice food, locations, a little bit of nature. Some people haven't been in nature for a long time. They're like, oh, I haven't been on a mountain for a while. I'm like, okay, this is a good, like, I would say anti-team building because team building has been taken by businesses now, like for, very boxed offices and things. And what I'm
Yep.
doing is like, making people touch grass with me with certain art projects is actually a nice difference. Um, yeah, I don't have plans with those. Like I just met, I meet people on internet, which is a new phenomenon, and they become my friends. I invite them to my house because they're now friends, and that's how it happens, pretty much. Yeah,
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 those moments where internet friends become IRL friends. I mean, they're
yeah,
they're beautiful moments, and it is. I mean, it's something that previous generations aren't. I mean, they would have known if they had pen pals or something set up by the
yeah,
school. Like, but generally, I mean, on the level that we all experience now, and in fact, Magnitude is a great version of that with James and Rusty, where they'd known each other for years before they
yeah,
actually met,
yeah.
like decades. I mean, you and I haven't met in the real life yet. I don't believe. I'm trying to think now. I know that there have been times where I know that there was a time when you were in Bristol, but I was in London or the other way
Yeah. I
around.
was trying to catch you. I remember once I was like, "Are you around?" And you're like, "Oh no."
Yeah. And I, because at the time it was really difficult for you to get over to the UK. I imagine that that's still, there were still complications and all
Yeah,
sorts of
yeah,
fuckeries with that now. Maybe less so because of your profile. I'm not too sure, but those moments where you finally meet someone who you've known for so long, you've seen over a screen,
yeah,
you've talked to on type for so long, they are again like wow, like proper full on hair standing up on end, goosebumps there, like because when you get them and you already know, and it's one of those ones. It's like people connecting with emotion in the music.
hmm.
You could be thousands of miles apart, but when you connect with someone, you connect with someone, really, I think. And that final IRL meeting, that real life meeting, is a real powerful moment,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is. It totally
That's
is.
brilliant.
I can't even describe it. It's like really nice, and I was like. I was okay. This is the power of yeah. I don't know. At the time, I was just thinking, oh, this is the power of VR and Discord. That's crazy because I was on VR during pandemic, and this is where I met some friends that I'm making some projects with together. I'm like, this is just like if I was telling this to someone in '80s, they wouldn't believe me.
Yeah, yeah.
All
We
the
are
new
living in the
formats.
sci-fi
Yeah,
world. We are
yeah,
living in the
yeah, yeah.
sci-fi world that we grew up kind of hoping for, really. but not quite in the way that we did. I mean, there's so many other things I want to add to that, but also I'm really wary that this is a podcast and we're probably around about an hour and 15 hour and 20 minutes. So we're now going into the talking too much kind of territory. So I'm going to save that conversation for another time. But I think spontaneous combustion for the sake of spontaneous combustion really is the most important thing, really. And it's just harnessing the energy and harnessing and really articulating yourself and getting what you need to get out of yourself, really, and expressing yourself in that kind of innocent form, and forgetting about the bullshit of the industry, the world, the internet, all of the other stuff going on, and really listening to that creative voice inside, I think, is what this all kind of boils down to, and is what has driven Mirror to be where it is and you to be where you are right at this moment, I think. Being
it develops all the important aspects of no one saw it coming. You cannot stop it. It's unavoidable. It can be ignored. So yeah, it all checks under spontaneous combustion.
Brilliant. And seriously, long may that continue. I always love connecting with you, and hopefully it won't be 2 years like it has been in this type of way. So that's awesome. Thank you, Billain, for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you so much. One more thing is, I wish you all the best with the same thing, man.
Thank you.
One more thing.